I've got to set my timer here. Okay. Hi. Hi, Jack, and hi, Vanessa. And I'm really sorry that your friend Maggie couldn't come today.
Yes.
Yeah. But we have got the baby Ryan with us, so that's maybe our third adult. So today, yes, we're doing the course Homeopathy at Home, and it's divided into 4 sections. So we've got a dog here too.
Stuck on my shoe.
Teddy. The first section will be an introduction to the basic principles of homeopathy, because it is interesting. I shouldn't be like that. I think it's fascinating. Then we're going to talk a bit about first aid, homeopathic first aid. Have a break, have a cup of tea. Then we're going to talk about using homeopathy in primary care, like colds, flus and stuff. And then the last section, we look at all the remedies, the main remedies we've covered in more detail, and they're all remedies that are part of this first aid kit. First thing I thought we should do is for you just to let me know your backgrounds and what you know of homeopathy and what you're hoping to get from doing this course.
I can go.
Yeah,
Well, I guess I'm a nutritionist, so I studied holistic nutrition. So I have come into contact with a little bit of homeopathy before. I don't completely understand it, but I guess I understand that part of the purpose of homeopathy is that like cures like, but in very minuscule proportions.
Very good. You've got the essence of it. Yeah.
Other than that, I'm not entirely sure how it does work. But,
I think you and the whole homeopathic community, as well as the rest of the world, nobody really understands how it works. It's one of the challenges we have, because you can't explain it fully.
But I guess probably more coming as a parent of 2 children, I do want to learn how I can utilise it for the kids mainly.
Good.
Also for ourselves.
Yeah. And Jack.
So I guess I come from a practitioner background of chiropractic, and I guess my understanding of homeopathy is also that like cures like as well, but also that the way that it's formulated is through the dilutions and the potencies on that regard. I've used, I guess, a little bit of it in practice, but more so just with, I guess, not the pure nosos, but sort of the more formulations.
Well, in chiropractic, there are a lot of, you have remedies that are prepared homeopathically, but they're often mixtures, and they're done through dowsing, or they're done through, different ways. I think they put them together.
So they're not formed, obviously it's purely and in that respect.
I mean, I'll come back to say this, but to my mind, there are, in a way, the principles of homeopathy, the like cures like, etc., is quite separate from how the remedies are prepared. And my sense is almost, that people don't talk about nano dilutions. And it's almost like we want to give the remedies a different name, because the only concern I have I think it's great anyone using anything prepared homeopathically, but people get confused and they think they're being treated, well, we call it classic homeopathy, and so it can get, it's just a matter of terminology. And I also think most of the flack homeopathy gets is because of how the remedies are prepared. It really offends hardcore materialistic scientists or non-scientists, but people who are very bothered about that. I don't know, and something else is going on too, because people who don't like homeopathy are very fierce about it. It's like
as with a lot of.
I guess you get chiropractic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I haven't used it very much at all, but from what I've seen and patients who have used it, some of them get fantastic results, and some of them, like even one drop of something will just overwhelm them, and which is just an amazing reaction for something that is vibrationally.
Yeah, and in theory,
You know.
placebo, and
Yeah.
you know, from
Yeah.
one point of view, not real.
Yeah.
Compared to conventional medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so and I think in a way, what happens. I mean, because I know I did when I did a bit of kinesiology. I did the initial kinesiology training because I wanted to understand it, and then you realise, well, you never really understand it, but you do get a broader appreciation of what's involved. So, there's a lot of information I have to give, and I try to break it up with examples, and really please ask as many questions as you can, because that also makes it personal. And if you've any experiences, any parallels that come up, throw them in, really, because I think it brings things to life. And I also just wanted to let you know that I think I talked to Jack last night about kits anyhow. It's a 20 remedy kit, but I made it a 21 one because there's a one remedy that I just can't, I can't leave it out, but I can't work out what else to leave out.
Yeah.
When I look at homeopathic first aid kits, there are like 16 remedies in every kit, and then the other 4 are floaters, it could be this, it could be that, I mean, because, everything about homeopathy is like that. Is it this, is it that? But, because I want to see a piece of paper here. I think you're really happy with that. But as you go through, what you may find is there's some remedies that are talked about, because I've got remedies that aren't in the kit here. And if there's something you think, oh, look, that one we need, just put a mark against it, because we can add them in. And I'm giving half vials, and I've done that because it just makes it a cheaper option, and then you can always refill anything that you use up.
Right.
And some you'll never use, but we don't know what that is.
Yeah, you have to have them.
So I'm happy to add any remedies at $5 each if you like.
Sure.
Yeah, and on the other thing I want to say, what I'm training you is to be able to use this book. There's always a challenge with how much information to give. Like, not enough information, you can't do anything. Give you too much information and you're a bit overwhelmed and you can't act either. And initially, especially, you may be thinking, oh, do I do this or is it this or is it that? And I really encourage you to call me because, like, you learn that way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it stays on the shelf because you're not too scared to act. And you also start to learn, like, you've got 2 boys, what works for them, and you get to know them. And I have mums now who ring me up and say, my son's got this. Last time I remember this remedy was good for this situation. I'm like, well, yeah, let's do it again. There are situations where what we learn today won't be effective, for whatever reason. It's not covered. And again, but if you phone me, I do sometimes, if I've got to do work and work out the remedy, I charge $30 for a 15-minute phone consultation. And I feel like that works both ways because then you don't feel bad about doing that. But, and I don't resent the fact that I'm giving my time for free. There's a balance though. If it's just like, someone's a bit fluey and I say, go stick out your tongue, look in the mirror, what's it look like? And they say, oh, it's red at the front. I go, that's Rus-Tox, and you don't need any more. That's not a consultation. But if I've got to sit down and work out the remedy, then I charge this. Okay. So, basically, we start off with the first thing I'd say so the book, I told you that, haven't I? The first, and there's an index, so that should help you get through it. The first thing you hear is classical homeopathy offers gentle, rapid and safe treatment for many physical and mental emotional complaints. And the safe, rapid, gentle that was the second aphorism, I think, of the organon of medicine, which is I'm laughing because Teddy's scratching himself under the face.
Yeah, I know.
Teddy, let's get you a cushion. Scratch yourself on the cushion.
I was like, someone's itchy.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, the one thing I haven't been able to treat homeopathically is fleas. Yeah, you sit there, you right with us under the table and you push it. One of my sort of first amazing experience with homeopathy was when Chloe, my daughter, was 1, and she started having a series of ear infections. And I was seeing a homeopath, but I had the belief that you had to have antibiotics for ear infections. So we'd go to the doctor, she'd get better. 6 weeks later, we'd have another ear infection. And we got to the 5th ear infection, And I've been reading a book called Toddler Taming. I don't know if it's still around, but it's a very conservative doctor's written this
Yeah,
book.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was reading where he's talking about the overprescription of antibiotics, which is becoming more and more an issue. And he said for an ear infection, you don't need to give antibiotics. Even if the child ruptures their eardrum, they'll recover. I'm like, wow, okay. So Chloe got another ear infection, and I didn't go to the doctor until, one afternoon when she was screaming in pain. And I sort of went, well, look, homeopathy. And I tried calling the homeopath I'd been seeing and couldn't get her. I picked up a book at Angus and Robertson on homeopathy, so I had a look at ear infections. And it said, if one cheek's hot, one cheek's cold, the remedy chamomilla. And maybe it was red and white, I don't know, but she had exactly that symptom. One cheek was hot, one cheek was cold. I had chamomilla in my cupboard because it's a known teething remedy. I gave her a dose. In 20 minutes she'd stopped screaming and she never had another ear infection. That was mad, It doesn't always work. I wish it always worked that well. I have another friend who's a homeopath, had a similar experience. I think that's just designed to convert us. But as I was saying, when it works like that, you just go, oh, because, brilliant. And one thing to say, don't give your child antibiotics, but when they're in pain,
you need to do something.
You need to do something, yeah. But the other thing with homeopathy is it is demanding. It isn't as simple as give the kid Nurofen. It's like you've got to work out. Really, it's like profiling. Each remedy sort of has a little picture that goes with it, of a group of symptoms, and you've got to match the one that best fits what your child's experiencing. And often that comes through practice. Again, I'll give you a quick story. Treating a little girl for a cough. She had a really loose cough. She practically vomit from it, and it was like rattling around in the chest, but very little would come up. And to me, it was instantly. This is a remedy called Antitard, Antimonium tartaricum. She took that fine. Then I saw her mother the week later, and she said, "Look, I ended up having to go to the doctor because by Saturday the cough was like a seal barking." And the doctor said there was absolutely no phlegm in the lungs. The lungs were completely dry. Which was, that was the effect of the Antitard. And the seal barking, there's another remedy called Spongia, which has got that lovely thing. I mean, not lovely, but it fits really well when there's that barking cough. And it's like one of the things that happens is if the picture changes, the remedy needs to change. And in her case, I mean, if she called me rather than going to the doctor, I would have just said Spongia. She would have saved the visit. I mean, I imagine the doctor didn't give them anything because there was no longer any phlegm, it was no longer a bacterial infection. It was on the road to healing, but very often on the road to healing, you go through different phases. So yeah, it isn't straightforward and simple, but I do find as you get to know your children, I mean, I'm thinking treating children, it's also yourself and your partner, you come to know what works for them. And sometimes it's really hard, is it this or is it that? Try this, if it doesn't work, try that. Usually one or the other will work, and that's kind of going to be very likely what you need. So, the principles of homeopathy. There's three main principles, but the first two are grouped together. And there's the first one, the most important one, is the law of similars. Something that creates symptoms in a healthy person will cure similar symptoms in a sick person. And it's a really tricky one because, I mean, nobody really understands why it happens. Samuel Hahnemann was a medical doctor in Germany over 200 years ago who stopped practicing because he felt he was doing more harm than good. He took up translating medical books, and he read in a book one day that China or quinine cures malaria because it's bitter. And he sort of went, doesn't make sense. So just for some reason he decided to take a dose. And then in the next couple of hours experienced symptoms very similar to malaria. And they went away, they did it again, and the same thing happened. And he tried it out on some colleagues and a couple of his 11 children. And so then he began to experiment with other known medicines at the time. Often they'll different plant herbal medicines. And, it all seemed to confirm this particular principle. Something that creates symptoms in a healthy person will cure similar symptoms in a sick person. The simple examples I've written there, it's like, what happens when you chop onions. Your eyes water, your nose can get a bit irritated. So there's a remedy, Allium cepa, made from the red onion, which is used to to treat colds and allergies when you have those similar symptoms. When you're it's like, are you in a chopped onion, chopping onion state? It's fantastic. And likewise, coffee. There's a remedy made from coffee, which is really good, particularly say for insomnia, where it's a buzz of ideas. You know, I don't know if you are able to drink coffee, I can't, but you know, you get kind of a bit zzz. And that's similar sort of, if it's that kind of insomnia, then this remedy coffee, it's really fabulous. I've got a bit of an analogy for it now. The way I see it working is, it's like when it's like basically what we're looking at is that your system's out of alignment. I mean, as in chiropractic in a way, but it can be on more subtle levels. So you're out of alignment, but you're so comfortable there, or you're so used to there, or the pressure putting you out is such that you can't get back. And in a way, what the remedy's doing is holding up a mirror and just saying to your being, this is what you're doing. And it goes, ah. And then it finds its balance. If there's a lot of pressure to push it out of balance, and that could be because it's a severe flu or it's a long-standing chronic complaint, usually you'll come back into alignment, but then you'll slip back. And I mean, this is the same, again, you see that, don't you, Jeff?
Yeah.
But you take the remedy again, you repeat the remedy, and when you go out, you repeat the remedy again. We'll get to that before. It's like one of the funny things with homeopathy is when you're dosing, like you can say every 2 hours, but it's really when the symptoms return. And it could be every 2 hours, and it could be every 3 days. You know? It could be every 5 minutes. The other interesting thing is that we try to prescribe one remedy at a time. We try to prescribe the remedy that matches, and that's where it differs from those preparations we were talking about before that you have. We're trying to find the remedy that matches all the symptoms being experienced. I think the first time I did this course, one of the women who took it came back to me, you know, a year later. She said, so with the kids, they've got a fever and they've got the cold, they've got a green snot. So I gave them belladonna for the fever and pulsatilla for the cold. It's like, well, you actually only need to give them pulsatilla. These words don't mean anything yet, but there's a remedy belladonna which is really good for fever. And sometimes children especially just run a high fever and they don't have anything else at that stage. It's like their system's fighting an infection with a fever. And in that then belladonna is a brilliant remedy to take. But in fact, like if you look up in the homeopathic repertory, it's a list of symptoms, there's over 500 remedies for fever, you know, and I'm sure there's more. And so it's more what's standing out in this situation. When people say, oh yeah, they've got a fever, and I'm like, I mean, it's like, yeah, that's not important in a way. But what's characteristic here, that one, green snot, and with that remedy pulsatilla, they'll be clingy and weepy and stuff. You give that remedy. There are exceptions to this. Usually, if I'm treating someone post-surgery, or sometimes with a fracture or something, and it's almost like, especially if someone comes to me and said, my auntie's having a knee replaced, and there's almost 2 remedies that are both going to help to cure it, I put them in the one bottle because auntie's not going to be able to handle taking this and then that. You know, normally, classically, you'd want to alternate them. And the reason is because you want to see the effect of one or the effect of the other. But we just never that. So, yeah, so it's one remedy that fits. We're always looking to find the remedy that fits the biggest picture. I mean, yeah. The other aspect of homeopathy, which is really interesting, is the way the medicines are prepared. I'm using the word medicine and remedy. Remedy is sort of the conventional term. There's a bit of reluctance because remedy implies it's going to cure, and you don't know. What happened, this is back with Samuel Hahnemann, back in the late 1700s again. Some of the medicines he was using were poisons, you know, arsenic, belladonna, they're all poisons. So while and they were used by herbalists all the time. But while you're going to get a cure, getting there can be pretty uncomfortable because of side effects. So his first idea was to dilute, and of course you dilute the side effects, but you also dilute the healing power. But then what he did, and why is a mystery, he began to agitate the remedy each time he diluted it. And so he'd do that serially. And somehow, with that process, I'll give you a lot of information on this. We're going to run out of time. But it's kind of important, and I think you'll be interested. We're halfway through the session already. Okay. Well, first I'll show you. So how it works, most remedies are a seed.
Sorry, just checking when I need to feed me.
Oh yeah,
No,
when he wakes up.
in a little, yeah.
C meaning a centesimal star, so they're diluted 1 in 100. So we've got 1 drop here of, let's say, belladonna juice, since I keep talking about belladonna, and 100 drops of liquid, which could be just distilled water. So I put 1 drop of belladonna in 100 drops of that. I shake it vigorously, and they have machines now that shake.
Yeah.
It's all calibrated. And then I've got a 1C, 1 in 100.
Wow.
Now up here I've got 99 drops of water, or sometimes they use pure alcohol. And I take 1 drop of my 1C and I put it in that 1 drop there. And I shake. And I've got a 2C, which is now 1 in 10,000. And I take 1 drop of that into 100, and it's a 3C. It's 1 in a million. So, I mean, in the kit, most of the remedies are 30C. I think someone likened that to a 30C. Oh no, a couple of them are 12C, which is like 1 drop in the Pacific Ocean. 30C, I think, was the sense of the distance between here and the moon, 1 drop.
So that's like 30 times dilution, is that right?
Yeah, it's 30 times 1 in 100.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So as in they've done it 30 times.
Yeah. And then we go to 200C. Then we go to 1M, which is 1,000 dilutions. We go to a 10M. We go to a CM, very rarely. They're usually very deep. I mean, it's sort of really deep, actually, really subtle. But sometimes in an acute fever, Kitty, come and scratch your
So
toe.
it is actually more potent and more diluted.
That's exactly it. It's
funny
more,
concept.
it's more subtle, I think. It's more subtle, that's the way to do it. The first year I studied homeopathy, I felt like my brain had been taken out and turned around and put back in the other way because it's very confusing. I came across some research. I came across some research that I'll just briefly tell you. There's 2 guys in America. One was a particle physicist and the other was an engineer. The engineer was working on a job to clean engines. He'd made this catalyst that worked, but it was toxic, so he couldn't use it. He met someone at a party. He said, "This is my dilemma." The guy was a backyard inventor. He said, "Give me a sample." And he apparently potentized it. He prepared it homeopathic. Took it back. They tried it. It worked. It's water. Chemically analysed, it's water. What's going on? The engineer called on his friend who was a particle physicist to look into it. He read a whole lot of information about dilutions and he did maths. There's some equation by Debye Hicks, I think his name was, of what happens in dilution up to 1 in 1,000. And previous work had showed that it's the 1 in a million point where the magic happens, where suddenly the curative powers awaken. And what he worked out, and he calculated this mathematically, is that, you know, when something's diluted, often there's a positive and a negative. And the more dilute, the more separate they are. But that positive and that negative are stretching out to meet each other. And I've got this as a little example, Vanessa. If you pull that and pull it away from me, I'm just going to do this on a small scale. Now, when you get to 1 in a million, so there's a million water molecules between this little, say, sodium, and we're looking at salt, sodium chloride, and it's finally, it gives up, and that its energy's charge has been going out looking for its opposite half. It gives up and it lets go, and like that's tiny. When you think a million molecules away, kapow! This massive power comes snapping back into it. It collects in its electric field. It suddenly has this huge charge. 8 water molecules, and what they said, it creates what they call a stable water cluster, which has the properties of ice at room temperature. So it's like another state of water. They also postulate, you'd love this, that in the meridians in traditional Chinese medicine are possibly made from stable water clusters. And when they're damaged, it's like, you know, they're doing all sorts of work on it. And a lot of people poo-poo it, and unfortunately the man who invented it's a Scientologist, and he has a dreadful mouth. And I gave a presentation on this at the Homeopathic conference last year, and there was another physicist there who poo-pooed it, but he actually didn't poo-poo what I said. And I wrote him a letter and I said, "Can you please look at the maths for me?" He didn't get back to me. Because there's these mathematical equations which you or I would just go, "Yeah, that's nice." But it's to me it's really interesting, and it does make sense. It's an electrical thing going on. So the water, there's a little change of the state of water. And then in different substances, how those stable water clusters manifest. And
absolutely.
those guys have created what they call double helix water because they said you get enough of these clusters, they form a double helix. They've got photographs, they've done of it.
Yeah.
And they found even just the simple preparation they've made, which they've done slightly differently from homeopathics, they've had amazing effect with people with cancer. That was the first time someone with terminal pancreatic cancer, or no, brain cancer, was being sent home to die, and 3 years later they were clear. Kids with autism, who knows? But, it's an interesting explanation. And so, hopefully there are enough scientists out there. The physicists are totally into the energy. So, that, they relate to energy. So maybe we'll get an answer. But, yeah, the other important thing is, the higher the potency, the more deep acting. And in first aid, 30 is usually what we go for. So, now the next thing I want to just touch on briefly, since we are so horrendously over time, is just the idea of acute and constitutional. What we're talking about, acute conditions are like colds or flus or tummy bugs. They've got a beginning, a middle and end. They're often an epidemic, so, the same symptoms are shared by a lot of people. And they're really what I'm helping you be able to treat for yourself, because you can see that constitutional refers to more long-standing conditions, usually that arise from within irritable bowel, depression, There's something that's like created from the imbalance in your being. That said, he's stirring a little bit. Sometimes I often see people with a child who started at preschool, and they, they get a cold every week. They pick up something. I give them a constitution, what that fits that child's constitution. If they can get in with a constitution as soon as this child starts getting sick, then often they won't get the cold. But once you get into the cold, then often it's better to treat the symptoms of the cold. Really traditional homeopaths, old school homeopaths, say you only ever give the person a constitutional, but and you will get better, but it'll often take longer. The pace at which we live, I don't know that that's always practical these days. I'll give you. I've jumped. I won't do that. Who's done that? So I just want to say, just when we get into the body of the book, also next to some remedies, there's an asterisk. If it's an asterisk next to it, it means then it's in the kit. If it doesn't have an asterisk, it's not in the kit. So, now the other interesting thing I just quickly cover, homeopathy remedies can be, he's going to join us here, can be dispensed in pills or as liquids. Liquids, the pills are made from sucrose, they're convenient for travelling, they've got much longer shelf life. In theory, 5 years, in practice. I met this woman who worked forever. This woman worked in the Homeopathic Museum in Washington, D.C. as a volunteer, and they had the kit belonging to James Tyler Kent, who worked in America in the late 1800s, and they were still using his remedies. It's amazing. But they have to put something on according to label.
Well, I know Vicky still has
fathers
or...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah. So the key with dispensing the pills is it's ideal you don't want to touch them with your hand if you can help it. That is not practical often when you're dealing with a child. The thing is, if you have to put it in your hand, give it in your mouth, if you've handled it, you don't put it back in the vial. So if you get 5 out and you pick them up off the floor, you put them in the vial. Because otherwise they'll contaminate everything.
So with contaminations, is it just the hand, or is it like if they fall on a table or, on a...
5-second rule, would you say? I don't know. Look, I have to say, I imagine I'm more loose than some. I would say then that's probably all right. But, the biggest trick with them is, this is what we could have done as an exercise, is tipping 1 or 2 into the lid. Because usually you tip 5 and then you tip them back and they'll all go back and you spend 5 or 10 minutes. I'm really good at it because I do it all the time. It's just a matter of practice. But it doesn't matter. If you give 1, you give 2, you give 3. I mean, they've basically all been medicated. And ideally, they dissolve in the mouth. Let them dissolve in the mouth. If kids, that doesn't always happen. With babies, you can also, what you can also do, two things you can do. You can crush them between two spoons to make them into a powder. When I've tried that, I mean, that's what I read in the book, then I've tried it, and it's it goes everywhere, it's really hard. The other thing you can do is you can dissolve them in water. Especially if you've got a cold or something, you dissolve a cup in a glass of water. Every time you take a sip, you take a dose.
Wow. That's probably.
And that's very economical. It makes it very economical. The reason we put the drops in alcohol, and I like to use diluted brandy just because it tastes nice, it's just as a preservative. Some people who don't want their child having any alcohol, or people who are recovering alcoholics and really can't take alcohol, will say, "Can I, keep have it in water and keep it in the fridge."
So the water doesn't contaminate them?
No, well, not. Well, I use distilled water, but yeah. I mean, purified water again. It's not. It's going to be okay. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I always had the question of what contaminates it, what doesn't.
Actually, extreme of contamination, because like in the instructions you say, don't eat 15 to 20 minutes before and after.
Yeah.
Don't clean your teeth. The cleaning teeth makes more sense because of the aromatic. If you're using Pepsodent or something, I mean, whatever's a Colgate.
Yeah.
I don't use a toothpaste like that. But we had our old cat who was rather feral. Had been in a fight. He had a cut. It was pussy.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. The only way I could know that he'd take the remedy was by putting it on his food, and I was giving him tinned food.
No, right.
And he took it a couple of days. In 2 days, it had cleared up. It had healed, and I don't think it would have healed otherwise. So I figure if it can handle a kitty cat, it's not too much of a worry. Sometimes there's a concern that coffee can antidote it, and it's people who drink a lot of coffee. You almost go, like old school would say, you have to give up coffee, but generally, if you'd expect the remedy to work and it's not, and the person's drinking a lot of coffee, then maybe try to cut out coffee while you're taking the remedy. And some people can't survive on like that, so it's like just take it away from the coffee. And again, just the power of the energy of that coffee can overcome it.
Yeah.
That said, sometimes you can take a cup of coffee if someone's sensitive to try an antidote. Yeah. So, and I've written down here. I think I've still got it in there. You've jumped ahead, but that's all right.
Oh, sorry.
Drops administered. And the reason why I like drops, that's important, is because each time you take the drops, it's recommended that you just hit it against the base of your hand. And that way, you're just changing the energy slightly, and that sense you won't get habituation. So, that's why I like to dispense drops in different parts of the world. In India, they give it to you as a powder in a little square of paper folded up, and they'll often give you just 3 doses. In England, it's all pillules, I think, and somehow, I was raised on drops. I like drops, but the pillules have definitely got their uses too, because they last so much longer, and they're good. I mean, I've got a box in the car. I've got a kit that goes with me. It's much easier if you're travelling to take these little. Happen to be perfectly sized for the 20 remedies.
Did you say in the car?
I have it in the car. I know the heat's not meant to be good for it. But
what about
radio?
From what I understand the whole electromagnetic. And the car's just one big electromagnetic conductor.
So it's not going to be good for it. But it also, and there's this guy at UTS who's in the physics department. There's been doing work with tadpoles and homeopathic preparations. Like they give them a homeopathic prepared growth hormone, and the sample, the control group gets just water, and they grow much better. But then if the growth hormone that's been homeopathically prepared is exposed to radiation, it's less effective. So it's not spoiled. I mean, I've got one of those things that's meant to reduce radiation, and you're right. I hadn't actually thought nowadays. The car is completely electronic. Look, they can survive a lot. But they're more effective, I think. I know somebody who I knew who had a first aid kit for years and travelled overseas a lot. She said, "I'm concerned now with going through customs and so I think they will have been degraded, and I'd like to renew them." But they work, just not as effectively. Traditionally, we say we give adults 5 drops, infants 1 drop, young children 3 drops. It doesn't really matter. 1 dose is 1 dose. I can remember Chloe drinking a whole bottle, and it was basically, that's it. She's just had 1 dose. It's just expensive. So, I mean, even with babies now, I tend to just, 5 drops, 3 drops. I mean, when we do drops, we tend to do one squirt. And that's, that's effective. It's not really important. What is more important is how frequently you give the remedy. In acute situations, they'll say every 2 to 3 hours. But really, when you repeat it is when the benefit begins to wane. I had the experience, Chloe burnt her hand on the column heater when she was a little girl. And I gave her a remedy, Cantaris, that we'll come to. And then 10 minutes later, my finger's hurting. I gave her a dose. Half an hour later, my finger's hurting. I gave her a dose. 3 hours later, my finger's hurting. A dose. Bedtime, it's a little bit sore. 1 dose. In the morning, I think you might have had 1 more dose. That's when you know it's really been effective, when the time between the doses gets longer. But because the other side of it, I remember giving a girl with a cough particular remedy, and I was just moving away from saying every 2 hours. Mother gave a dose, and children have got such vitality. Often they don't need much remedy in their bed. And then 2 hours had gone by. She was outside playing happily. The mother gave her another dose, and she immediately became really cranky and stuff. And it was like she was doing what we call, she was a healthy person taking this substance, and so she was getting the symptoms. And she was actually, the symptoms the mother described were the emotional symptoms. And recently with someone with hot flushes, and I gave her a remedy, and the remedy, and the hot flushes went away, and she kept taking it. And then she rang me up a week later, and it was like, I've got this and this and this, and the flushes are worse. How often are you taking it? Every time I have a flush. And I said, stop taking the remedy. And in about 5 days, everything had calmed back down again. And again, her mood was starting to beat out of the remedy. So, yeah, it's not good to take too much remedy. But if you don't take enough, you're not going to get an effect either. And I had that when Chloe was little, when she had got this really high fever after Green Day at preschool, when they gave them food coloured with green colouring. Yes. And I didn't realise what it was, but fever, and I was giving her the remedy every 2 hours. I was actually a first-year homeopathy student, and I hadn't read that in acute stages, cases every 5 minutes. And finally I thought, this isn't working. I gave her a different remedy, and the next thing she's having convulsions. We were in the hospital. It was an awful mess. But basically, I just needed to be giving her. It was belladonna 30C. It was an acute thing, and I needed to give it to her every 5 minutes. I then got belladonna 10M from the homeopath, and when we had Blue Day, and that's when I realised what was happening, because she started getting the same symptoms, and I gave her a dose of belladonna 10M, and it's all right. And I told the preschool, and they said, we won't give her, we'll give her different food next time. Times have changed very quickly in that respect. So, yeah, and this is the most important thing also, if after 2 to 3 doses nothing's happened, you can be pretty sure it's the wrong remedy. And it's like, call me, talk about it, maybe we need something else. Can well be that the range of remedies you've got, it's just not covering it. Or sometimes you'll get a thing where you get a little bit better because it's sort of helping, but it's not a bullseye remedy. It's like, the third ring out from the target. And I mean, sometimes I'm sure the case is the bullseye remedy doesn't even exist. We haven't identified it yet. Because at the moment, new remedies are manifesting at just such a rate. If I wasn't totally pressed for time, I'd tell you about that. Because there's some really interesting ways that they're exploring homeopathy now. Now, we've got 5 minutes left, and I've got 2 minutes left, so we're going to just keep going. Because I wanted to do 2 things. I want us to do a little exercise, which now I'll get you to do. It's sort of a role play before we go on. And it's like, imagine you telling your friend that you've decided to treat Aiden's cold with homeopathy, and your friend is like, you've got to be kidding. Okay, and so it's more about what I'm wanting us to do is to explain to your friend why you're using homeopathy. And now you're going to do it really badly at first because you can't remember what we've said, but it's almost like you do it badly a few times, you start to be able to, because it's hard to grasp a concept, but if you articulate it, I mean, you've got a sense of articulating it already, Well, you know that IQ is like, and it's natural. It's natural, and it is when it's good. It's really quick. But do you want to? I mean, I'll pretend to be your friend if you like. We can take it in turns, and then because then we can be Jack giving one of his patients a homeopathic preparation. What's this? It's all nonsense, isn't it? So, I hear Aiden's got a cold. Have you been to the doctor yet? Did you get her some antibiotics?
Oh, look, we took him to the doctor just in case, but
Yeah.
we'd like to give him the antibiotics if we can treat it more naturally.
Yeah, or what are you going to give him, some herbs?
You're thinking.
Yeah.
We're thinking of treating him with homeopathics amongst a good healthy diet.
What's homeopathics? Isn't that nonsense? Isn't that sort of...
They're very simple, very natural preparations.
My brother was telling me about it. He's in the Skeptics Association. He said it's all just, people trying to make money out of you. It's nothing. They're just giving you, there's nothing in it. It's all diluted and it's just, it's just fairyland.
Oh, well, I've seen the homeopathics work before with other preparations.
Are you sure it's not just mind over matter, like placebo effect,
Oh, well, if it helps and it heals you, well, that's always a plus.
Very good. Okay. Do you know one of the answers as homeopaths we have to that placebo is that it works with babies. Where they say, oh, well, the mother feels better, so the baby feels better. Or it works with animals, that when they had foot and mouth disease in England, it was huge, the change, that they were really successful. And cows aren't going to respond to placebo, especially when they've got a serious...
We get that in chiropractic too. It's sort of like, half the time, they always talk about treatments being placebo, that someone's getting treated as placebo, and it's like, well, babies get better, so, and sort of like, well, okay, but, yeah.
Oh, I know. And the other day I was listening on the radio, there was a medical segment, and they were joking about the fact that, we don't know anything in medical science, ha ha ha, but yet medical, and it's like, exactly, you don't know. And this is one of the best things I ever heard. How many medicines get recalled?
The side effects.
Side effects. Yeah. Homeopathy, nothing has ever been recalled.
But people are so angry about the use of homeopathics and people dispensing them, yet they're not so concerned with the side effects of the medications.
So anyhow, Jack, here's your challenge. So
Sure.
What's this you're giving me? It says homeopathic. What's that meant to be?
Well, I've just given you this homeopathic, which is a very gentle type formulation for your child, just to help with their cold. But
do you think it's really going to work? I mean, isn't it just a bit of
bit of hogwash?
Oh, yeah, that'll do.
I guess as with all things,
yeah.
We're going to see if something may work or may not. But what I like to do is I like to start very gently with you. And this is the most gentle form of preparation that I can give for your child. And so therefore I would like to start this first before we move on to other measures.
That's so cool. Actually, one thing I found when talking to new mothers, that the best way to get them interested has been to say, because what it's like when you have your first child, and it's suddenly like, even if you're, medication plus person, it's like, I don't want to be putting all these chemicals into this pure energy. And that's a lovely thing about it.
Unfortunately, I've used that line many times before. So
you have. How do people respond?
Yeah, look, I think when it comes to sort of toddlers and things like that, I mean, even comes with treatment.
Yeah,
and even with adults, I always like to say, look, I want to start with some really gentle work with you first. I don't like to go heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And so if we start gently and see how that goes, and
then we can.
If that's effective, then let's keep on that path and progress as need be.
So. And I guess there's a thing too. If someone's coming to see, I shouldn't say even a chiropractor, but on the respectability scale, I think chiropractors are closer to the norm than a homeopath. But they're still ready to step outside the very conventional box, aren't they? God, I'll never forget, my father was scheduled for back surgery and we finally got him to go and see an osteopath. And he never had the surgery. And he'd been suffering for years, but they're quacks, Okay.
But great quacks.
Great quacks. I will just quickly. I've got a few little questions. This is like a little review quiz. No, because I just want to do this. So it's not about, and this I want you to use your books because part of the idea of the review questions is also to get you to practice using the books. Not so much now when we get into more things. So the first thing is, and you already can answer this. Explain the law of semblance. You knew this before we started.
So just a substance that produces a particular symptom in a healthy person will often cure those symptoms in an ill person.
Perfect. Got it? Tick. So, Jack, you can answer this one. How are homeopathic medicines prepared?
They're prepared either in pilules or...
Oh, no, it's more the dilution.
The dilution. So, I guess 1 drop of whatever the substance is in 100 drops of water is 1 dilution, and then.
But what happens before we dilute it?
The ones, the shaking. Yep.
The shaking.
And then that's the 1C, and then as we go along, it's
There's the shaking thing's an interesting one because it's what's always been done, and then there's scientists in America. They reckon you don't need to shake, but I think they're also preparing in ultra pure laboratory conditions. So that may be partly why the shaking is sort of doing something. It's just what he said to me actually, because I asked him, it's if you're making these little stable water clusters, then when you shake it, it's like they break apart, so then they can proliferate more. I think that's partly right. Question: high potencies like a 200C compared to a 30C this is multiple choice. More dilute and for less severe, less dilute for less severe, more dilute for more severe, or more dilute for less dilute for more severe. So the 200 versus the 30 first, is it more or less dilute?
More dilute.
More dilute.
For more severe.
More severe, yeah. You already actually answered that question as you were talking. So give an example of an acute versus a constitutional condition.
So I guess acute is colds and flus, and constitutional is more, I guess, depression or long-standing behaviour and
chronic illness, rheumatoid arthritis. And in fact, and usually with the constitutional, you'll get the fact that it's the personality, it's the way the person stresses that will help you work out which remedies needed. You know, like there's some remedies that are more for different organ systems, but there's also that level that parallels that. I mean, I can remember being about 17 and I got really sick. It was the last term of high school and I sort of had this disease that might have been a chronic fatigue nowadays. It wasn't quite going to a fever. And I knew I was sick because I was unhappy. I'll never forget my headmistress at school saying, well, we know you wouldn't have any emotional problems, dear, because you're such a happy, well-balanced girl. And we go, no. But I think I understood for me anyhow that my emotional state and my physical state are really...
It's the
same thing, isn't it? What last thing? What about advantage of pilules, advantage of drops?
Pilules more potent.
No.
Longer shelf.
Longer shelf life. Yeah. Same. They're exactly the same potency. Yeah. They're going to travel better.
Longer shelf life.
Yeah. So why would you? I skimmed over why you use drops. He was so intoxicated.
Drops would be... Is it a little bit easier to give to babies?
It is actually easier to give. And it's more dynamic because you shake it each time, you give it a little shake, so it just shifts the energy. And you know, one of the great things about homeopathy in general that I haven't mentioned is that children love taking it. I mean, even herbal medicine, Chinese medicines taste disgusting.
Yeah.
Even supplements, you know, they still have to swallow. They taste good. The kids, everyone says, children once they get into it.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember giving this little 3-year-old something for she had a terrible whooping cough. They actually lived in Melbourne, and the mother sent me a video of the girl coughing. It was really clever. And I sent her a remedy, and she said Daisy walked around holding onto that remedy because it's eased her cough. Anyhow, so that's the end of our first section. Only gone 50 minutes instead of 40, apologies. So we basically talked about the principles of homeopathy, about how the remedies are prepared and how we dose them. And I'll pause and then we'll go on to our next section.
Okay.
I mean, I have to stop this one.